Hey, tonight it's going to be awesome. It is going to be great. Want to welcome everybody on camera, online, in building, everybody that's behind me to the side. Tonight we're going to have our second episode, we could call it that, in a 12-week series in Toolbox. Now, a couple things before we get started and bring up the couple that is going to bless you. I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to bless your socks completely off your feet. Your toes are going to be up like this. It's going to be a good time. But before we get into that, I want to talk about a couple of announcements, not only Toolbox, but also we have coming up auditions on March 1st. We have auditions, and they will be at 6 p.m. It is for the Easter production. It's going to be cool. Believe me, you don't have to memorize any lines. Pastor Joel's going to narrate. There's going to be a lot of movement and that kind of thing. It's going to be cool. It's going to be good. We're going to have soundtracks, music going to be bumping and whatnot. It's going to be good. Going to be good. Second thing is we got Pop Stroke coming up. Everybody likes to play a little bit of golf. March 16th at 5 p.m. We're going to meet over at Pop Stroke. It's going to be a great time. We will also eat like we always do because, you know, a brother don't miss no meals. We're going to eat afterwards, so make sure you bring money for the Pop Stroke and to eat. Now.
Please register with QR code.
What's that?
Please register with QR code on screen.
Yeah.
Or on the MOSAIC page.
Yeah. Please register with the QR code. For those of you that are online, those of you that are in building, just go ahead, get out your phone right now. Boom. Let us know you're going so we know how many people we got to reserve for. It'll be good. It'll be good. The other thing I want to bring up for any other events, activities, information, make sure you go to the website and you just go to the bridgeway.tv. You'll go ahead and go to family, click on young adults, and you'll see the page. It'll have all the information on there. We'll have a calendar on there of all the events. It's going to be good. I'm going to get out the way. I want to bring up this couple. Now, just a little story. When I first met Pastor Julian, it was a huge blessing to me because Jill and I had only been here maybe one or two Sundays. And we was in the atrium here. Pastor Joel was in the atrium. We were talking. I believe Pastor Micah was there. And this gentleman walked up, and he had a dozen eggs in his hand. And we were talking back and forth, and I said, man, Jill, we need to go to the store because we need to buy some eggs, and we need to get this and that because we hadn't bought our groceries and all that. And Pastor Julian looked at me, and he said, here, you can have these. Now, the reason why I share that is because that is the type of person that these guys are. They are the type of people that love God, and they will give of everything that they have to bless people. So tonight, we know what the format is. They're going to speak. Actually, tonight it's a little different because I spoke with him earlier. He said that he's going to speak, but also, guys, you can chime in, ask questions as they go. He said, I want it to be a little bit, more organic. So we'll do that. But then afterwards, with Toolbox, I'll come up. We'll have a time of application. And what that means is this. We're going to take out our cell phones because you got your cell phone with you everywhere you go. And so I want you to go to your notes. I want you to type in something that they said that really touched you. But not only type in something that they said that'll touch you, but underneath it, steps to application. Because as I always say, wisdom is nothing, knowledge is nothing, applied knowledge is everything. So make sure you take notes, you get ready to get blessed. Right now, bang your hands together as Pastor Julian and Miss Chelsie comes on up.
Well, thank you guys for having us in your house, in your place. My name is Julian. This is my wife, Chelsie. And like Pastor Joe was saying, that if you guys have questions, because we're tasked with giving the message, the topic of marriage, and marriage being a broad subject, you can peel it apart and dive into it in a bunch of different ways. Obviously, we don't have the time to go over everything tonight. So if you guys have questions about something that we say or something that we've gone through, if we reference a story, just raise your hand, shoot out a question in the back. Obviously, we're not going to be able to see you. Just give us a heart. Just make sure we can hear you. And we'll definitely, we would love to have questions and talk through marriage. It's something that we feel that going into our marriage, something that was very hard for us to do, as it would be for most couples, but it kind of centralizes the verse that we'd like to get into. And so if we had a topic, if we had to title this message, it would be called A Mosaic Marriage, if you will. Hey, dad jokes. She loves my dad jokes. Dad jokes are going to be strong throughout. Please just deal.
Now that you're a dad.
And so our verse that we kind of like to centralize ourselves around for tonight comes from Romans 8:28. I don't know if you guys have heard of people, how sometimes we have life verses. A life verse of mine was Colossians 3:23. It says, work as if you're working for the Lord, not as if you're working for mere man. And so for me, oftentimes I can get caught up in, well, I don't know if I should go the extra mile or do the extra work because who's going to see and why is it a big deal? And I realized that if I'm working for the Lord, then I'll always push. I'll always give a little extra. And so that was a life verse for me, something that I used to help guide my life. Romans 8:28 is one of those verses you'll see people tattooed across for them or wherever it may be. And Romans 8:28 goes in to say, and we know all things work together for the good to those who love God and to those who are called according to his purposes. You guys ever heard this verse? God works all things together for good. Can you show me your hands? You've heard this verse? Yeah, we've heard it before. But I think this verse can oftentimes make people excited, but there's a word in there that can not make people excited, and it is work. Amen, right? Yeah. Work is hard oftentimes, but I think this is part of the design that God has given us for marriage, is that we do work towards it. We do work on it. And so Romans 8:28 is going to be the verse that we pull from, along with some others throughout. And I think it's important to mention that because I think lately we see people and they're wanting to get into relationships and they want things to already be perfect. If this person is not perfect, if they don't check this, check that, check here, then I probably shouldn't get in. There's too many red flags. There's too many things going on that we'd have to talk through and work through. And so I think oftentimes people stop themselves from getting into a relationship with somebody that they do trust or somebody that the Lord may has petitioned and placed for them, because it's not a perfect fit. And we forget oftentimes that things like relationships often take work. And so Romans 8:28. And so I thought we'd kind of dial it in just to give us somewhat of a compass. We talk about why, as husband and wives, we work together. How do we work together? And what do we do that makes us work together? And so before we jump into everything, I thought we could start with praying with one another. That'd be all right. Okay, so you guys close your eyes and bow your heads. Father, thank you for this time. Lord God, I pray that throughout this moment, throughout these next minutes or hours, whatever you would have us talking, Lord, I pray that you would hide us behind your word. I pray that the things that we're talking about would come across as your truth and not our ideas or just our story. But Lord, I pray that you would be amidst all this and that we would all see you. Lord, would you lend us your spirit so that we may speak in truth? And would you lend us your spirit so that we could understand the word that you have for us tonight? Father, we love you, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Amen. So Chelsie is going to tell you just a little bit about our ages and our family and marriage, and how long we've been together and all that good stuff. And so,
Because you don't remember?
I don't.
Okay.
I figured it'd be a safe thing for me to allow you the privilege of telling that part of the story.
I'm 34. He's 35. I got married when 25, I think. It was in 2014. What?
Yeah, I was going to say, now who doesn't remember ages?
I'm just doing math. So coming up on our 10-year anniversary in July. And yeah, it takes work for sure. We have two boys, 3 and 5, Christian and Elijah. But aside from the children part of our marriage, because that's a rabbit hole in itself.
And that takes work too.
Yeah, that takes a lot of work. I think that's more work than marriage, to be honest with you. So if you ever are struggling in marriage and think, oh, having a child would make it better. No, it's not true.
Yeah,
Don't do
people
it.
actually think that.
It makes it 10 times harder. And children are a temporary assignment. The marriage is till death. I mean, you take vows and it is to the end.
Yeah, hopefully we get kids for about 18 years and then they're off.
Yeah, so so that's a temporary assignment. But aside, I'm getting distracted. Going back to marriage, it will be 10 years in July, and we were, I guess, younger when we got married. I mean, 24 and 25.
Mid-20s,
yeah, mid-20s.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I don't think you're being sarcastic about that, to be honest with you. Yeah.
No, not at all.
We were both in school, both in college, so plenty of nights of coming home from an 8-hour shift and both hopping on laptops and doing our homework and studying for exams and what have you, and trying to juggle the, just the home duties of laundry and cooking and et cetera, and still trying to, be available.
On a relationship.
Worked on a relationship, absolutely. So it's not just, unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, no, that it is not. And that brings us to our why.
There you go.
Of why should we get together? Why should we spend time and work on our marriage? And it's a question that if going into marriage, or if you've had parents or mentors or anybody like that, they'll ask you, okay, well, why do you want to get married to this person? And it's a hard question to field if you've ever asked yourself this question of, why do I like this person? Why do I love this person? Why should I get married? And it's kind of just these things that oftentimes we've assumed that we should do, but have we ever, and we do, and there's reason and rights to it, but why? It'll cause you to think. And so I wanted to kind of dive into this a little bit together. And even though we're going to be going over certain verses and and our reasoning, it's a multitude of different reasons and verses of why and how and what. And so to dive into the why, my own reasoning is that we get to go through this road of life together. When you think about it like that, I think in word pictures oftentimes. And if I'm going down and traveling down this road, I would much rather have somebody in the car with me or somebody on the journey with me to be able to make it down the road with and accomplish this goal together and make it and go through hard times, go through good times all together. And so that's kind of my reasoning, and just I'd really like to do that with somebody. Another why is that I think it's a designed institution by God. If you were to read in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, and then we're going to pop to 23 and 24. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, it says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that a man should be alone," talking of Adam in the garden. "It is not good that a man should be alone. I will make a helper comparable to him." Comparable to him. And we jump to verse 23. "And then Adam said, this is after the Lord has created this woman. He says, now this is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and she will be called woman because she was taken out of man. The Lord had taken a rib as Adam was caused to fall into a deep sleep, and she made woman from him. Therefore a man," verse 24, "shall leave his father and mother to be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." They shall become one flesh. They will come together. And I think there's an intimate desire as human beings that we have set inside of us to be joined and to belong, to be a part of, to be bonded to, and to share with others, to share with another. And I think this is part of God's design for us. First, a desire for the Lord that can only be filled by Him. And then the gift that He's provided in the form of a spouse, in the form of a partner that we get to, again, using a word picture, go through life with together, travel down this road together. And so that's just to touch on the why. Again, we can have many different reasonings and things to go along with it. But we're going to move into the how. And to move into the how, we're going to change and jump in our Bible. I got 2 Bibles here. They're just not here. They're in the back where they should be, and they belong, right? What good are they for me back there? So if you have your Bibles, 1 Peter chapter 3 is where we jump into. And again, it's another popular passage of scripture that at some point, if you've been to a wedding, chances are you've heard this verse. But in just reading it, I think there's parts of it that get overlooked. I remember I was at a wedding one time and somebody asked me very insultingly, why do you say that verse? And just the tone, the way they're carrying themselves. There was this word in this verse, and the word is submissive. I think oftentimes people can get this word wrong, or they can skew it into a light that it doesn't belong. And so I wanted to read 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 7 to you. And it says like this. And it says, "Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, and that even if some do not obey the word, they, with the word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. When they observe your chastity, conduct accompanied by fear, do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of heart, with incorruptible beauty, of gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid with any terror." That's verses 1 through 6. And this was titled Submission to Husbands. Now, the next part of scripture that we're going to read is one verse, and it's titled A Word to Husbands. So it says this in verse 7, "Husbands likewise, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered." And so there's a lot just within that capsule that can stick out to you. And some of the things that stuck out to me we'll talk about here, but just something today that was sticking out to me that I never realized before is that Peter gave 6 verses worth of instruction to wives that they may submit to their husbands, that they may put action towards in relationship with their husbands, and he gives 1 verse to the actual husband in relation to the wife. And in almost 10 years of marriage now, I've learned that I'm the moody one in the relationship. I think there's a stereotype very much alive that girls and women are moody and they can be like roller coasters and emotions and enigmas and all these things. And I'd submit to you that as a man, as a husband, father or two, I'm pretty sure I'm the moody one. I'm the roller coaster one that's up and down oftentimes. And so these 6 verses that Peter gives, I think are absolutely phenomenal in the fact that for me, having Chelsie as a steady, and this is just part of her character. She doesn't have to wear this as a burden, I don't think, but I think it's just more so as her character and who she is. She's just rock solid steady. And this part of being submissive, it's not so much so that it's like, okay, everything is your choice and your decision and it's yours, so I'll just do whatever you tell me. It's more so, I'm going to trust you to lead us, and I'm going to respect you to lead us. And as a team, as any relationship should be, a team, I think there's input from both ends in a relationship like a marriage. There's input from both sides with respect from a wife saying, yeah, you're going to be the leader. I'll give input, and me as a husband look for that input and really honor input, but knowing at the end of the day, if there's a decision to be made, I'm the one that's going to have to make that decision. It's God's design. I should be set up as a man, as a husband, to be able to do this, and should be relied upon to be able to do so. But the fact that Peter gave these verses to a wife, that she can keep her husband in his ups and downs and roller coaster of life, in his moodiness, for me to come home and have somebody in the car with me going down the road that is just steady, keeps me up and down, and then gets me back to a steady place. And so I thought, of course, a wife keeps her husband in a place in his mind that is steady. And so he gives us a plan of action throughout these verses. And so for wives, I think we had 2 in here that I think were just right there obvious for me. 2 parts of this plan of action. First one, to trust God, right? As a wife, will you trust God? And even though this is two wives specifically here with Peter, I don't think it's hyperbolic. I think it can exist on both sides of the relationship for husbands as well. And so for wives, trusting God, will you manage your husband as a wife, or will you allow God to manage your husband? Will you allow God to manage your spouse, or will you be the one to manage your spouse? We often hear times of leaps of faith and different things, and Lord, they're not acting, or they're not doing, or they're not saying, and how can I make them do this, or how can I get them to do that? It's okay to think that, I think, but oftentimes that can lead us to a place, into a thing called manipulation, and that's not healthy for anyone in any relationship, friendships, husbands and wives, parents, and what are kids called? Parents and kids? What's that relationship? I don't think that can be healthy for anyone. And so for wives, specifically, but not alone, will you trust God? Will you trust Him to manage your spouse? And then 2, if you want to read 2, I feel like I'm doing all the reading.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
And then the second course of action that I think for wives stuck out to me.
Oh, me?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can read that.
Accept authority. And will you accept His leadership I'm just going to read your notes and I'll elaborate.
Yep.
Will you accept His leadership as a team input is given from both sides? This is not an all decisions are made by Him kind of leadership, but do you trust Him in a deadlock to make the decision and support Him? I was trying to think about a time in our marriage where we had a important decision to make or needed to decide on what path we're going to do, and we talked about it, but it was ultimately like it came down to like the burden was on your shoulders, so to speak. And I was trying to think of one, and I think it was when we moved, when we first got married. Long story short, when we became newlyweds, my parents recently moved into another house and had not yet sold their previous house. So we were basically squatters for like a year because we just moved into their house. It was great because we did not pay anything. And then of course, once the house sold, we had to get out. And there was a lot of back and forth because I grew up in Carrollwood and he's from Dade City. And of course, there was a big difference between like country life and city life for both of us. And trying to find that agreement and compromise was really a challenge because every time he had something to say about living in Dade City, I would negate it with something I had something great to say about living in Carrollwood.
Tampa, the city.
Tampa, yeah. And we compromised in San Antonio, and it was, he found the house, and it was something that we prayed about, and it was just that ongoing conversation for that season, but ultimately, like, I relied on him to make that choice and to kind of like lead our family and future family in that. And we're still in that house almost coming up on 10 years. And it has been the best place for us. And obviously there's a lot of growth in that area, and it's been really great. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that would have been the same outcome if, I was to trample on your intuition, I guess, as the leader of our relationship and just kind of be like, oh no, we're doing this.
Yeah.
So that's just one example that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of examples come to mind for me either, because ultimately when we start talking about these things, we're talking about input from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like most decisions that we've had in our marriage throughout this time of 10 years, we've usually come to an agreement on most things when we really sit down and talk and really start to like put pen to paper and hash things out. Oftentimes we end up landing on something together, which kind of is like a little caveat, like asterisk here, because for me, coming into the relationship, we dated for 5 years on and off. I would love to tell you guys our testimony, by the way, but it's a whole nother
It's another
the way that the
mosaic.
Lord, the way that the Lord worked out was just amazing too. But throughout our time dating of 5 years, I realized that her mind and thinking and urgency towards finances was far superior to mine, even to this day. And so for us, we had the conversation. I was like, hey, if you're up for it, you can have the finances and tell me, I'll give you the checks. And we decided to have a joint checking account. That was called.
Yeah.
So I'm bad at money.
Yeah, no, everything's joint that we have.
Joint checking account.
Yeah.
And that she is really kind of the one pushing the envelope in our finances. Hey, envelope, finances,
Got
mails,
it.
bills.
Yeah.
And what,
Okay.
she has, but she is more so the one leading our finances in that route. And again, we still have conversations, good, important conversations about like, hey, how should we be investing our money?
Mm-hmm.
What should we be doing with our money? How do we grow our money? Where should we spend our money? And these kind of things. And so she's definitely got a more urgent heart and mind and more understanding towards that. And so for us, that's one of the things that she more so has a big say in. And so all this stuff about leaning on leadership, I recognize a place where I'm kind of weak at and gave her reins for that because I obviously need help. Believe it or not, I don't know everything. Thank you for laughing. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Question.
Possibly you guys did not have this, but you talk about a time whenever you guys are making decisions and you pretty much, it sounds like the other one just kind of yields. Is there a time when you guys were making a decision and the other one, specifically maybe even looking at Chelsie, you know that Julian, is ultimately, the man and the priest and all of that. We know that biblically. But there's still times whenever your heart is like, I don't know where you're going with this. Talk maybe about how you have that heart change.
Okay.
How you prepare your heart, because that's huge, in a marriage, because you can hold resentment and bitterness over years
Right.
whenever you don't do that.
Well, something about us that I don't know if it's common or not, but I'm a huge type B personality. I'm super just easygoing when it comes to things, where I feel like he's very type A. So I don't want to say we stay in our own lanes when it comes to things, because it makes it sound like he's making all of the decisions and I'm just like, oh, I'm just along for the ride, whatever. It's not like that, but at the same time, we're both really rational people, and we will talk it out and maybe over communicate, where I feel like that's going to just come with time and growth in a marriage, because we were together for 5 years prior to marriage. So it's not like we met and 6 months later we're engaged. I met him when I was 18, and I feel like you do a lot of developing between 18 and 24 when we got married, and a lot of it was with each other. So I don't know if it's just been very smooth because of how we met and how our personalities are and how we are just as a couple. But can you think of an example of when we really went head to head? Maybe that purchase that you made with the bike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay,
Yeah.
I'll start and then you can elaborate.
I remember that.
Yeah, so this was when maybe a year, 6 months into our marriage.
Not long.
Not long at all. And this was before we discussed finances. Because, sorry. So we...
It was after we discussed finances. We just didn't detail them out. We
Oh, yes.
learned along the way.
To be very specific. So after we got married, we were just so excited, went and changed my name, got a new driver's license, went to the bank. We did all these errands, right, to kind of get on the same page as husband and wife, and one of them being, joint banking account. And there was talk, because it's well, should you have your own account and I have my own, because we hear of that in other couples, or we join everything, but we have our separate savings account for, just money that we just want to blow on something that's maybe not important to the other person. But we're no, let's put everything together, because in between he and I, we just felt like that was the right thing to do for our marriage. So everything was joint. And we talked about it, but we didn't elaborate. And so when he came home with a road bike,
Nice one.
a very nice one.
Trek Madone.
And I don't know if any of
Trek
you
Madone.
are into like road bikes, but they get expensive very quick. It's like the same amount of money you would spend on a golf cart and a bike. And I'm talking about like a bicycle, okay, not like a Harley.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm sitting on a couch and he's like wheeling in this thing. Just like, what? Where did that come from? And it was a whole thing. And he had very good intentions, and I'm sure he'll defend his case.
I will in just a minute.
But he spent 500?
300.
300. Okay, which doesn't sound like a lot right now. But when you're newlywed and you're squatting in a house, it's a lot of money. And you're both going through school and paying your own way through college, and it was a lot of money at the time. And we're talking
Still is.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
But as far as just a surprise purchase of $300 on a recreational
Yeah. It was,
thing, it was a
fitness
lot.
fitness was a big thing for us, and it still is to an
Yeah.
extent. And I, as a single man, I would mountain bike here in Florida, trail ride, I guess, more so. But I would mountain bike. I had mountain bikes, heavier, bigger tires, more gritty, heavier bike. And she was doing triathlons at the time, and so she had a very light, skinny frame, fast bike. And we would bike together. That was one of the ways that we would date and kind of bond and have this time. And every time we'd go out, I would lose, and I could not keep up with her. There's just no way. Not because I wasn't physically able to. It was because in my body, it was the bike. I couldn't go fast enough. She would outrun me and everything.
I'd be like, come on, honey.
And so in my head, I was like, if I get this bike, we'll be better at bonding. We'll enjoy our time more because I'll be able to keep up. And it just so happened that the doctor I worked for at the time, he upgraded his bike, and he was like, "Hey, I'll sell you this one for $300." And I was like, "Sold." And because it was
a good
It was
find.
about a $900 bike.
Yeah,
And
he got a good deal
He
on
blessed
it.
me with selling it to me for $300. There's no question, no contest. You save $600. That's a yes. Okay. And so went ahead,
When
pulled
your
the
bank
trigger.
account's like $50,
Yeah.
it's a hard pass.
Went ahead and tapped into savings, pulled the trigger, and we did it.
Yeah.
And so then that caused us to have a very in-depth conversation, so much so to the point like, hey, so of course you got freedom with spending money in the account, but let's put some parameters. If it's over X amount, let's run it by each other. Maybe there's
Yeah.
a bill that's coming up, maybe there's something we're saving for or something that we forgot about.
We
And so
learned
it
a lot.
caused us to communicate on a different level. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, like if there is something that you're kind of mentioning about, I don't know how this is going to work, I don't see him getting out of his own way or her getting out of her own way. I can't think of a specific time aside from something like that. But a lot of times it's grace that wins in
Yeah.
those times, and just being like, you know what? I know the word and I know Bible, and if I'm saying you're the one, then you're the one, and we're going to learn and we're going to see. And if I'm right, then I'm probably rubbing your face one good time. And after that one good time, we'll be good. But it's going to be at one good time. I've definitely had that feeling for me too, because we've done things that you wanted to do and wanted to go in and say, all right, I don't think it's going to work out. And having this conversation in my head, and like, we'll see. We're going to see how it goes. And then sometimes it works out, and sometimes it's like, nope, told you so. And I
Yep.
learned early on, you probably shouldn't say things like told you so, and keep record and keep scoring those things too. Doesn't help. But nonetheless, again, having grace in those moments and knowing that nobody's perfect. And I heard this a long time ago, and I think it's helped me out tremendously, in that your spouse loves you. Do you trust that that person loves you? Because if you do, you can accomplish a lot. Because anytime there's something that happens, something that goes off to the left, they do something that makes you mad, they do something that frustrates you, you've told them 100 times and they still don't do it, or they make a decision that you don't agree with and they've gone their own way, and that, you know what, stop, take a breath. I know they love me. And then go on whatever else you're going on. Go on that conversation that you're getting ready to have with yourself, go on the justification, but start it with, I know that they love me. And if you start yourself with that point, then it's really hard to get to the point of, they did this because they hate me, or they did this because they don't respect me, or they did this
Right.
because of X or because of Y. If you really trust your spouse and that they do love you, start with that, and then start your reasoning from there. It's helped me a lot. And so...
And I think also when we fight or disagree, we don't fight dirty, because that can be an easy, like, it would be an easy thing to bring up the bicycle every time, you know, there was money that was spent that I feel like wasn't justified.
Coffee.
Or coffee. Oh my gosh. I'm not a coffee drinker. He's a bougie coffee drinker. And
Not true at all.
And so when I see the account, it's like, okay, $20 at Starbucks, $10 at Starbucks, $20 at Starbucks. I'm like,
A little bit of exaggeration here. However,
like I said, I don't drink coffee. I don't know what the average coffee is at Starbucks, but
mine is $5.
plus
Once a week. If that. But now I go to the gas station.
once a week. Anyways, there's a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
But that would be very easy for me to throw coffee in your face or the bicycle in your face.
Yeah.
And you don't want to ever fight dirty, because first, it's not fair. Second, it's just not nice.
It's not healthy.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm talking like I'm with my kids.
And like bringing up the past is never a good thing. If you catch yourself in the point to where you're in an argument and you're bringing up the past, you've done something to where you've let something infringe upon your feelings for much too longer, and this thing has started to fester. Paul tells us in Ephesians not to let the sun set on your anger, because it'll fester, and by the time it's festered and you're bringing it up a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the road, now it's anger on top of anger on top of anger on top of anger, and now your spouse can't even get to a point to where they can explain themselves because they can't make it through the stack of anger that you've got against them now. And so for the sun not to set on your anger, for me, is another big point, just because you'll fight well that way. You'll fight then and there. And I'll be the first one to tell you too, like, I'm not good in the moment fighting. My mind doesn't think that fast. Sometimes I get too hot-headed and I just need to calm down. And so I've told her too, I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to talk to you about this tomorrow or in the morning or whatever it is, and go from there. And so the sun technically sets, but still.
I was going to say, the sun is setting.
But let me finish. We don't go to bed. We still sleep in the same bed.
Yes.
All the time, every night. Kiss, love you, and if we go to bed at the same time, let's pray. And then in the morning, or wake up in the middle of the night and have a conversation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And go from there. And again, that's part of figuring out this road together. How's your spouse fight good? How do they fight best? And that's part of it. And so
we also stick to the facts. Like, we don't really bring emotion into our fighting. It's very factual. Like I said, we're both very rational people, so maybe we're just weird, but like, there's no emotions. Like, there's times where, I'd get frustrated and like tear up because I'm frustrated and I can't articulate like what I'm trying to say or how I feel, but at the same time, it's not like this roller coaster of emotions and drama. And
I'm gonna say this just because I'm mad.
Right. It's very factual. Like, sorry to bring it up, but we're going back to the bike thing because it's the example that like, hey, you spent $300. That is money that could have went to X, Y, and Z. Or let's come up with a solution of how we can do this better. Like, you want to get a road bike and it's $300. Let's save for it. It is your boss. You can communicate with him like, hey, I do want to pay it, but let's wait until the end of the month so I can kind of get things in gear and get it done with the dad jokes now.
Nice.
Thank you. So we can get things, together. And see, we're just, I can't even start.
So this is kind of like a call to action or plan of action for wives. Again, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, but according to the scripture and the text that we have here, this is the way that Paul was giving as instruction to the wives. Plan of action, 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. And then men, we get to verse 7, and it's titled for men, or for husbands. I forget exactly what it was titled, but it was for husbands. And so in verse 7, I think he gives us 4 plans of action. We get one verse, but it's chock full with things. And again, not to exist within a vacuum, because I think women can glean from this as well. And so we take care of our wives on 4 levels here in this verse. The first one is emotionally. I'm going to pull it up real quick, just this verse in verse 7. Husband, likewise, dwell with them in understanding, giving honor to your wife. And that part, emotionally, giving honor, I think it's in reference to emotion. That we would respect our wives' feelings, their thoughts, and their desires. We may not always agree with them or understand them, but we give respect to be able to listen and allow God to guide you in uncharted waters as men. You'll hear that, oh, women are a mystery, and you'll never understand women, and this and that and whatnot. But nonetheless, I don't think we're supposed to all the way. I don't think we're supposed to innately understand what's going on in somebody else's mind, in somebody else's heart. It's not for us to be able to understand every single thought, every single feeling, and every single desire. I don't know if y'all know this, but men and women are different with good reason. And so, nonetheless, amidst not understanding, we still have duty as men to give honor to our wives and listen. And so we give honor emotionally. Number 2 for me was intellectually. He goes back and he says, with understanding, husband likewise, deal with them with understanding. And I know this is kind of contradicting. Didn't you just say we won't understand? Hear me out. Intellectually, to me, does have an element of understanding, and to the sense to where you're paying attention to her. You pay attention to your wife. You don't just skate by. Pastor Joel references this all the time. Some things that get so regular in a place that they become furniture. And so you get used to passing the same furniture every day. Oh yeah, it's there. I know it's there. I know the color, I know it, I know where it's gonna be, I know what I can use it for, and it's there. And then we don't really notice it anymore after so much time goes by. Pay attention to your wife, pay attention to your spouse, because even though you might not be able to fully understand them, you can get to a place to where you can get to know their moods, their feelings, their needs, their fears, and their hopes. And that's part of the beauty of living together, is that when you start paying attention to that person, you start noticing, oh, she's got a look in her eye. Oh, she's carrying herself a little differently. Oh, she's walking with a different intent. Her voice has changed a little bit. She put her bag here and not there, and she made a beeline somewhere. And you start to notice because you've been paying attention. And so intellectually for me, you start to pick up on just different cues. And so this comes with it. And so that was number 2, intellectually. So far, emotionally and intellectually, we take care of our wives. Number 3, physically, dwell with them, right, in this verse. It says, likewise, dwell with them. More than just living under the same roof. This is where we start to have some fun. I think a lot of couples forget that having fun is an essential part to having a healthy relationship. A lot of times you start, hey, what are you looking for in a relationship? Oh, I'm looking for this and I'm looking for that. I don't really remember a time where people says, I'm looking for fun. And it's like, or in a husband and a wife, oftentimes fun gets looked over. Don't forget about fun. Fun is essential to this. And so having fun is an essential part of having a healthy relationship. Have fun with whatever your hobbies are together, but also, you ready? Sexually. Have fun sexually with your husbands and your wife. I'm going to try not to look at too many people. Sorry, it was weird. Hear me out. Hear me out. I'm used to talking. I'm used to talking in a dressing room. I'm used to talking in a dressing room, making sure that everybody's dialed in. So, hear me out. No sex before marriage. I don't know what your relationship is with the Lord right now, what your relationship with church is, but no sex before marriage causes you to communicate in such a way that you have no choice but to connect. You have no choice but to connect. If you're in a relationship longer, and it's different for everybody. For us, it was 3 years the first time, and then 2 years the second time that we dated. If you're in a relationship, and we were not Christians the first 3 years we were together. We weren't following the Lord like we were. I think we claimed to be Christian, but we weren't really following the Lord.
Right.
Then we took a break, got back together, and the last 2 years that we were dating, We had both found the Lord for ourselves, and we didn't have sex before marriage. This was uncharted waters for us. By not having sex, it caused us to communicate on a whole nother level. And it caused us to have communication that was forced us to connect with each other. Because meeting a physical need is easy, essentially, when you get to this point. It's easy to make sure, because in that act of love, you are indicating to that person, I love you, I accept you, I think you're beautiful, I want you. You're communicating all this thing through a physicality, and that's easy to communicate physically. It's much harder to do it with words and acts of service in these different ways. And so by not having sex prior to marriage, you find a connection that is different than anything else. And it's needed in marriage. You need this connection in marriage, because when you get to the part to where you are married and you are able to have sex, that's the easy part to connect. That's the cherry on top to connect in that area. The hard part is finding and being able to communicate in such a way that with my words, I can build you up. I can affirm you. With my acts of service, I can do these things. And so no sex before marriage is essential to connecting with your spouse on a whole nother level. That would help you progress through marriage, because sex isn't going to be the thing that keeps you together. Promise you that. Sex is not going to be the thing that keeps you together. I talk to so many people who got into it for this reason, or who are dating for this reason. They never realized how to talk to each other. They never realized how to support one another. They missed this step because they went straight to the physical part of it. And so to be able to communicate on this level of connection is essential to a healthy marriage. And so that's number 3. Number 4, so far we got emotionally, taking care of our wives. Emotionally, intellectually, physically, and now spiritually. Spiritually, being heirs together in the latter part of this verse 7. It says being heirs together of the grace of life. Together, heirs, together. In the most central place of this life that we live, there comes a relationship with God. This is central to our lives here on earth. Husbands and wife have equal standing in this place. Here on earth, I'm pegged as the leader, wife, support, helper. But in the relationship with God, we have equal standing there in this place. You ever heard the quote, the ground at the cross is level? It is. And this is where we see it. When you're both growing closer to God, you will simultaneously be growing closer together. It was told to me coming into this relationship in the year that we took off apart from each other and dating. Somebody who I looked at as a mentor told me she has to love the Lord more than she loves you. And I don't know about you guys, but have you ever heard something and you're like, yeah, got it, that's great. It's great advice. And he would tell me all the time, over and over. And then one day he said it, she has to love the Lord more than she loves you. And I was like, man, why haven't you told me that before? And it hit me, and I was like, if she loves the Lord more than she loves me, what do I have to worry about? She's going to be more taken up with honoring the Lord than she is with me. I know my fallacies. So does the Lord. But if she's really worried, or she's really concerned with her relationship above the Lord more than she is mine, that relationship with the Lord that she has is going to wipe away any worry that I'll have. The Lord's going to honor that. And by doing so, is going to honor our relationship. And so I think one of the things that gets overlooked, oftentimes we've done it and failed at it. We're like, let's do a Bible study together. Let's read the same chapter in the Bible together and then talk about it. And all these things. And that's good. That's really good to do. But for us, it just never worked. Like, we do it for a little while and then we'd always fizzle out. But I think one of the things that always gets overlooked in this department is praying together as a husband and wife. Praying together. I've actually talked to people and couples who are like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, why? What do you mean you're not doing that? And if you can get to a point to where you're praying together, one, prayer is powerful, right? The Bible also says that where 2 or more are gathered, therefore I will be too, with them, right? We're a strand of 3, a cord of 3. But also, when you start praying together, you start hearing the heart of your spouse. Oftentimes as a man, for me personally, it can be hard to be vulnerable in moments and be like, hey, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm concerned with. This is where I suck at, right? I don't want to talk about that stuff. I don't know about you guys, but when I start praying for things, Lord, help me to be a better father. Lord, help me at work because I don't know what to do in this case. I start opening up to the Lord, and by doing so, I'm opening up to my wife, who is there to help and support and reassure and have good ideas. And so praying together, I think, gets overlooked so much in relationships. So don't forget, and when it comes to taking care spiritually, make sure that you're praying together. Simple. Maybe not the easiest of things, but simple. Do you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I didn't want to be like, unwrap that praying together thing, because most of the people in here are not married. I'm guessing at least half of the people here are not dating. Okay. So, first off, hopefully you guys are getting stuff for later on.
Yeah, we're wrapping up too, by the way.
But, no, you're not. You're going to keep talking.
Okay. Just want to share how we're doing on time.
But my question is this. When you guys were dating, what did that look like as far as the spiritual aspects of the relationship? You know, were you guys praying together? Were you, doing devos together? Because I know you guys had like the 3 years and the 2 years, and I'm trying not to give away your
testimony.
Your testimony, because we're gonna have to have you come back and share that. But what did that look like? You know, and how did that set you up for a marriage? You know?
Yeah, there was prayer was probably the thing that we did most consistently. We weren't perfect at it, but it was over the phone for us oftentimes, or whenever we'd leave each other's house or whatever it was, we would, not every time, but the thing that we kept to the most consistently was prayer. And so if we prayed over the phone, it was like, hey, what are you doing this week? Okay, let me pray over that thing. Or, hey, what's going on at work? Okay, let me pray for that thing. And so it would ask, because you're already talking about your lives together and what you're doing anyways. Well, hey, let me pray for that. And I remember one instance too, it helps, because we were talking about whether or not you should take a job at the time. And you're like, I don't know if I should take it, I don't know if I should do it. I was like, well, what have you been praying for? We've been praying for opportunity, right? And so now we have this opportunity for a new job, and so I think you should. And it helped us. I remember that as a highlight point for our relationship. And I don't know why exactly that moment, but I remember that because it was something that we did together and praying, and it really helped us kind of make decisions. Again, it helped us to open up and be a little bit more transparent with each other in that aspect. I think that answers the question, maybe.
And also, you're not always going to be in a mood to pray with one another, because I mean, if you just got out of a heated conversation or disagreement, you just spend all this time disagreeing with one another, and it's like, okay, let's pray. Like, it can almost sound like not condescending, but like not genuine, like almost forced. Like, wait, we're only praying because that's what we do before we get off the phone, or are we actually in a time where we want to pray? And so you're not always going to feel like it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Also, it, like what you were mentioning before about getting into devos and reading the word together and stuff, like that all sounds fantastic. And if you can do it, hands down, do it. There's been really no follow through for us when it comes to that, as far as like reading the same chapters and talking about what we read. Praying has always been just kind of the easiest, but not to sound like we're lazy, but it's just been just something where we can connect spiritually with one another, and like what you talked about, hearing each other's heart, because you're not going to always just come home in one event and complain to your spouse, but you can really hear the heart of your spouse and get more insight as to what's going on in that prayer moment.
Yep.
And also, prayer is important to us together too, because we don't get to do church together. I don't know if y'all know, but he's the children's pastor. So he's upstairs every Sunday, both services. So I think the last time I actually sat with you in church without you having to like get up to go do something, maybe 4 years.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's been too long. I don't even know. But so you can't necessarily rely on, oh, we go to church together. Like, it has to be more than that. It has to be more than just showing up. It has to be like actual spiritual connection with one another to our Heavenly Father. It can't just be, oh, we sit next to each other and we hold hands in church and we look really cute. No, it's more
Gotta
than
be
that.
in the trenches,
Yeah.
praying.
you know, it's deeper than that, is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because you may not always have that, you know,
Yeah.
you may not always have that opportunity to go to church with your spouse.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so we close with the how, the why, the how, and the what. And so we've gone over the why and the how, and we get to the what. What is it that we get to work with? What is it that we're working on as we're in this journey together down the road of life? Again, a mentor of mine too, he said it to me like this: being somebody that works. That was actually a good time to bring it up, because being somebody that does work for the church. He told me, he's like, no matter what you got going on, no matter where you go, no matter what you get elevated into, your first ministry will always be your marriage. Mm-hmm. That's where the rest of your ministry is going to spring from. If your marriage isn't good, nothing else you touch is going to be healthy. And so he told me your first ministry should always be your marriage. And so in the Greek language that the New Testament uses for the term ministry, it always centers around acts of service to others. And it sometimes carries a more powerful connotation of servitude, specifically to God. So ministry, to me, from what I was gathering, essentially implies a sense of being duty-bound to work under God's authority, in essence, towards others and towards Him. And so for me, marriage is a bond that we work together under the covering of God through a covenant with Him when we say our vows. And at the very least, it can serve as a light to others of the grace and the mercy and the love that God ultimately shows us through His love. One of the things that sticks with me is that I want to be the best example of God's love in her life. And it's a hard task to do. But if I can get close to it, then I know she'll see it. And if our marriage is healthy and if our marriage is good, then it's a light that we get to carry to other people who are thinking about, I'm not really cared about marriage, or struggling in my marriage, or fill in the blank for whatever it is. I think our marriage is a ministry that we get to share a light with to other people, essentially. Yes.
We both have questions.
Cool.
Awesome.
So if you're in a relationship with someone, and whether it's marriage or dating or whatever, and someone from the outside or someone, that's
No.
somehow connected meddles in that relationship, and then the situation ends, how do you deal with that? Because in your relationship and dating or in marriage, probably bet that someone's trying to meddle in and say, well, you shouldn't do this, or maybe it's not going to work out, and whatever. And how does that affect the emotionality of it, given that you're both rational people and you don't like to put emotions into,
Yeah.
things like that?
And I think that exists on both scales. That can be really good, and that can be really bad. It depends on that person. If that person is a friend and somebody you really trust and somebody you really know based off of their quote-unquote track record, if it's somebody you're willing to put stock into and believe their word, then depending on what it is that they're saying, if they're meddling or if they're just trying to tell you a little bit like, hey, my friend saw or my friend heard or this and that, I just want to let you know, then maybe it's something, depending on who that friend is or who that person is to you, that maybe you take them on their word and you confront your partner or your spouse or whoever it may be. But at the same token, I've heard of more, and I'm almost certain it's the leading cause for people getting divorced. If not, it's one of the top 3. People get divorced because of families interjecting into marriages as well. And we've had a friend really close to us that they had some issues, but amongst the top 2 issues they had was family interjecting in that place. And essentially it kind of was part of what led them to get split up. And so I think that somebody meddling or trying to interject into your current relationship, I think that's going to be up to you to take stock on that person and decide whether or not you're going to lean on them as somebody you can confide in or tell them, hey, I need you to respect me enough to make my own decisions. I need you to respect me enough to take this relationship where I think the Lord has us going, and I need you to stop talking to me about my relationship. What's up?
So you guys mentioned that she's the one that kind of works with finances in the relationship, and it's the same way with my husband. I'm not very good at numbers, but I'm the one that's kept. See, this is before I got married, a spreadsheet and stuff like that. So it made sense, and it comes very easy for me to kind of be like, okay, you know, we got a paycheck, I'm gonna divide it this way.
Right.
How do you go about? Because sometimes I struggle. Hey, we're spending a little bit more on this category than we're supposed to.
Coffee. Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
How do you handle like things like that without kind of? I struggle with. I don't want to be the leader.
Right.
I want to be the one kind of making the final decision. But how do you like gently are like okay?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. For me.
You want me to leave this one?
No. For me, I just, when I was like having to repeat myself month after month, I just felt like I was nagging. He never said I was nagging or like being annoying, but I just felt that because I kept repeating myself. So what was helpful for us was because I had the spreadsheet like you, I had it in my calendar. I had, you know, am very organized with it. I put it in his calendar. So when we have a joint calendar on our iPhones, and I have reoccurrence. So for like our mortgage, okay, every day on the 1st, this is due, and it has the dollar amount in his calendar. So on the 1st, he sees, oh yeah, this amount's coming out for the mortgage. Oh, on the 15th, Tico, that amount is coming out. So he sees it. So if he's getting ready to make a purchase, at least he has the
wherewithal.
The what?
The wherewithal.
Yeah, the empowerment to look in his calendar and be like, okay, if I spend this much here and this much is being taken out tomorrow, we're looking, okay, yeah, we're good. And like kind of making sense of it on his own, because I don't want him to be like, oh, can I get a $5 coffee? Because I'm not his mother, you know, like that's just not healthy.
And for me too, like coming from my side, like what really helped me too is like we do agree on the same goals financially. Right. And so that's a huge thing for me is that like I know where we want to get. We agree on this goal, and then she brings me the evidence and she lays out stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, hey.
And then I'm just like, yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
Because who else is going to be?
Yeah.
The boys aren't old enough to blame just yet. And so I start, like, genuinely, I start to feel guilty because I know we've had this goal together, and I'm just like, man, I'm kind of sinking the ship here a little bit. And so for me to see the goal that we have together, and I'm the reason we're not hitting it, I mean, as a man, as a leader, because I do lean on the word, I want to make sure that we hit our goals and that she can trust me to be able to get to a place. But at the same time, she has the grace, knowing that I'm not going to be perfect, knowing that, and I love that too, like she doesn't expect me to be perfect on anything, thank God. And so that's a huge thing for me too. But knowing that we share the same goal, and then her being on it enough to be able to get to the place to where it's like, hey, look, this is what's going out, this is what's being spent. We would have hit this goal had we not spent $40 on coffee this month.
And also, like, I don't want to take away, I know we're talking about coffee, but of course apply it to more, you know, reasonable things. But coffee is just the easy example here. I don't want to take coffee away from him because, you know, he enjoys coffee. Just because I don't enjoy it or just because I don't drink it doesn't mean that he can't. So it's like, okay, what's a solution? What's a compromise here? Instead of getting Starbucks a couple times a week, can we maybe dial it down to once a week or twice a month? And let's get like an espresso maker at the house. And that way you're still having nice coffee, but it's not something that we're paying outrageously for, you know? He does a lot of cold brew. So, I mean, he will make cold brew at the house. So like I said, he still gets coffee, but we still have our goals in mind.
Do you guys meet, like, let's say once a month or so to check on how the budget is doing?
Yes. Not once a month, because we kind of lax with that. Yeah, because
Have
I'll
you-
say
have
we
you
need to talk.
Miyagi'd me?
Yeah, no, because sometimes I'll say we need a financial meeting, and you're like, okay, and we'll talk. But it's really if something is changing, like when our escrow changed for the mortgage, or when we have new financial goals with investing, or
One of the boys isn't in daycare, and so there's more money in the account, or
yeah,
somebody
like
gets a raise, or
right. It's just basically talking about, okay, this is what's changing and we need to be on the same page. But it's not like every week at Monday at 9 we're having, a meeting.
yeah. And likewise too, like I'm guilty of this, and I don't have no shame in saying it. I like stuff. Like I like stuff, and people oftentimes be like, "Oh, do you like experiences? Can you?" Like Chelsie loves experiences.
I'd
Take
rather
me
travel
kayaking, go
and
somewhere.
experience rather than
Yeah, give me stuff. I like stuff.
stuff.
And so
I like stuff.
It's just the way it is. I'm not afraid of it anymore. And so I tell her, I was like, hey, look, I'm really looking at this thing, and I think we can have a lot of fun in it, and whatever it is, that thing, this is why I want it. And then, of course, it's like, okay, well, let's start saving up for it. So I'll start grabbing money out of the account on paydays or whatever it is. And so it's not like, because I've heard the opposite too, to where like some people, whether it's the husband or the wife, like they're not allowed to touch the finances at all. And that's not good, because you're working really hard for your money. You should be able to enjoy it. And so not outside of a conversation, and not outside of sabotaging the relationship or the house or the marriage because you're not hitting your goal, because you're saving $200 out of every paycheck to get the boat or the fishing rod or the dirt bike or whatever it is. But there's a way that we can save to be able to get this thing. And I think you got to be okay in the long run saving up for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just over communicating to, just talk about everything. And based on your financial situation, because that's an individual thing, like maybe make it a threshold. Like, okay, if you want to spend over $50, shoot me a text and let's just kind of make sure we're good. Or, just something like that that's reasonable, and that you're being courteous of the other person. And it's not just like, oh, okay, well, I need to get groceries. Oh, we have $0, because that's not, you don't want that.
As the guilty party in this whole thing, and as the ship sinker, the goals part has been the thing that helps me the most, is knowing that we share the same goals and we're trying to get to this goal, and then seeing the evidence of like, okay, this is where we're spending our money, we need to stop here and go there, or stop doing it here, so let's find another way that we can make it work.
Yeah.
So that's been the biggest from that side of the coin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Anyone else?
I want to preface this by saying not comparing your marriage to my parents.
Okay. Uh-oh.
She's not. She just said she's
I
not.
know, but for her to like tee it up like that, I'm just a little.
Like you guys have it's the finances again, just the joint account, and then my parents have, like they each have their own separate checking versus, well no, they have the checking and then they have a joint account where they do like groceries, finances for the house, and like
The home
mortgage
stuff.
out of there, yeah. So how do you think that your guys' joint aspect is better than that aspect of kind of
I think it's
the separate?
For me, because I've thought about that, especially for like when we were early in our marriage, like, okay, we'll have like a home account and get all the bills and everything paid for, and then, a little bit of a cushion for like a date. But over here is like the money I want to spend for like going and get a pedicure or, whatever. And him maybe having, I don't know, getting a golf club or something where he's not really going to see my money being productively spent on pedicure, and I may not see his money being productively spent on a golf club. So I thought about that, but then I also thought in a marriage, and I can only speak for ours, no one else's, but for us, it came down to the scripture as far as two are joined as one. And I wanted that to be true for every aspect in our marriage, not just this category here, but this category, it's still going to be separate. I wanted everything to be joint and to be one. So I thought longevity-wise for us, it made sense to just have everything joint, because I never want to get to a point where we have a heart for money, or we have the love of money. And I think if you get into separate accounts for he and I, it would have been an easy category to maybe fall into. Like, I'm taking all this money that goes in our joint account because I really want this. And just kind of like finding and seeking ways to kind of capitalize on that, because he doesn't know what I have in this account. It could be thousands of dollars, and he has $5. And say I want to take this really grand trip and travel internationally because I've been saving and traveling is important to me and things are important to him. Well, guess what? I'm traveling by myself because there's no money in our home account because it's spent on bills and kids, and there's no money on his account because he has the things. So I just feel like it wouldn't be healthy for us.
Yeah.
And I wanted everything together.
Yeah, I
as
eventually
one.
thought we'd get to that place too. Just like it'd be lopsided one way or another.
Right.
And you got these bills and I got these bills, and eventually those bills are going to be inconsistent because if it's electric or water or what have you, like they're just going to be inconsistent bills. And there'd be some kind of turmoil or some kind of unknown or some kind of like, well, it's not fair kind of conversation. And so I didn't want to get into anything along those lines. And so for me, that was a big part of it. And then also too, like I was like, man, if we put our stuff together, we're gonna be rich. Which is not the case.
Not the case. Not the case.
More bites and more coffee.
Yeah, I make
Rich
X
at
amount,
Starbucks.
and she makes X amount. If we put that together, we're gonna be loaded.
Yeah, no.
Not the case.
Because everything doubles.
Everything doubles.
Your electric bill doubles when you have a spouse, and when you
And
have
so-
kids, it quadruples.
And I say that to be funny, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like truly, it was an element of our marriage that we didn't have to hide from each other again.
Yeah.
And finances, and again, it works different for different people. I know
Yeah.
I know loads of people who have finances apart
And are
it's-
super successful in marriage.
And it's
Yeah.
just a different kind of work and a different kind of mindset than what I have personally. And thank God she too, because it just, for me, I was like, I don't ever want to get in, I don't want to toe the line of being to that point to where it was like, well, it's not fair because you make this and I make this and I have to pay for this and you should be the one.
Yeah.
And all and everything. And it was a really scary conversation for me to get into that, because when it comes to finances, again, it's another top 3 thing of why people get divorces. And so
Yeah.
it was something that I wanted to be always on the table and just always like, hey, this is what it is. And I'll trust that I cannot buy the coffee if it's really starting to sink the ship, kind of a thing. And so,
Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I often hear people say that like the first year of marriage is the hardest, so why do you think that is? What makes it hard?
the
First year of
first
marriage.
year-
Did you think it was hard? That's when
I
we were
get, I
squatting.
think I know why people are saying that. And I think people say that is because if you haven't, I think the first year living together is hard. And if you've been that couple to where you're not living together until you're married, and then you get married,
That was us. We didn't live together until we got married.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then it's one thing when you date somebody and you're over for the early part of the night, or you're over for a different part of the day, and you're over with them for just, I don't know, call it 8 hours or something. But then when you come home to that person and you're sleeping next to that person and you wake up next to that person and you're cooking dinner with that person constantly, you're learning and seeing new habits and nuances and different things that this person has that you didn't see before. Like, I didn't know before that it sounds like she's chewing a bunch of screws whenever she chews. And so there's
What?
chewing. I feel
Okay, wait.
so
So he's acutely aware of any chewing that goes on, and this could be chewing with your mouth closed, chewing
Yeah.
gum, chewing anything.
it's the sound. No, it's the sound of
The sound of chewing just bothers
It's the
him.
sound of
It's not my
slosh-
chewing,
sloshing.
it's everybody's chewing.
sloshing is awful.
I don't
Says that
slosh.
about staff members.
Yeah,
I do. Jen's with me though.
yeah.
But
And
this
see, I
is-
don't mind. I'm like, whatever. The
I
kids
think
are
it's-
chewing with their mouth
yeah.
open because they're 3 years old.
I think it's the stuff
And he's
like
like,
that.
close your mouth.
Like truly,
Oh my gosh.
like truly, I feel personally attacked. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. But then too.
So we have music playing in the background when we eat dinner, like
Yeah.
a bistro.
So we figured it out.
Yeah, yeah.
But then also I think there's things to where like
We have a solution.
to where she grew up in a house, I grew up in a house. Our home life were very different. Both full of love. Like we
Yes.
were blessed with our families.
Yeah, we are.
And but our families, we grew up different. I grew up, and my mom and my grandmother lived in the same house as me, and they would take care of the cleaning, of the laundry, of everything. She grew up, and after dinner, it was their jobs to clean the kitchen and do all that. And so I liked to cook, and I was the cook, which worked out great because she doesn't like to cook so much.
And I'm
so
the cleaner. I'm the dishwasher.
that was a rule in their house.
When I was growing up, my dad would cook. He was a chef. He would cook. My sister and I would do dishes and set the table.
And so whoever cooks doesn't have to clean.
Correct. In
That's
our
a-
house, and it works that way. So
Yeah.
he normally cooks, and I clean, and it works out.
And again, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like that's just
Right.
kind of one of the nice things. But for her, if she was the cook and she was used to the person who didn't cook clean being me, if she were cook and she had to clean, then maybe she starts to get irritated. What's going on with this dude? Why doesn't he clean up? Does he not care? Is he trying to insult me? Is he trying to belittle me because I'm the cook and I'm the woman and I'm this and that? I could have taken that same exact role as the cook. Or did they just grow up in a home to where they didn't have to do it? And it's a conversation we have to have of like, hey, look, I think we should share this responsibility, or I think this should be handled this way. And so I think that's part of the first year is the hard year of just people really kind of coming into the different nuances of their spouse and learning the different things that either they were raised with or these little nuances that you hadn't seen during dating. And so I think those are the things that can make it hard.
We also talked about a lot too. I mean, it all goes back to communication. When we first got married, I was doing dishes, cleaning, because he would cook, but I was also doing laundry, and it became like a struggle to juggle all of that, you know, especially when I became pregnant. And so we just had a conversation. I'm like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm doing a lot of house chores and I don't have time, so what would you like, dishwasher or laundry? And he chose dishwasher.
I hate laundry.
And I do the laundry. So I still clean after he cooks, but if the dishwasher needs to be unloaded, he's doing and putting away the dishes, and I'm doing laundry.
Yep.
So we have like our roles as far as the household goes. As far as the house and outside, he has the lawn, and I clean like the bathrooms and the floors and stuff in the home. So I think if you have a clear understanding on what your role is and how it can be shared with your spouse, it's going to set you up for success.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to feel the weight just on you to do everything and make sure everything's perfect and beautiful.
Yeah, and really if you're feeling a certain way, if you're feeling like something needs to change, if you're like, I don't like the way this made me feel, say that.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because again, that stuff is just gonna pile up and pile up. Early on, we had a lot of that. We mentioned a lot, like, hey, you said this and I didn't like the way that you said it, I didn't like that you said it, or you did this and I didn't, for whatever reason, I thought this when you did that. And tell me why you did that, or explain to me, or whatever that conversation would be. Because oftentimes, again, that person isn't doing something to insult you, or whatever reason you drum up in your head. If you're like me and overthink things, oftentimes they just did it just because they either didn't think about it, didn't know you were going to feel that way about it, or they were just raised in that kind of way. And so I think that, is why oftentimes people say the first year is a hard year. But the early years were the really fun, easy years, I think.
Yeah.
If that's any kind of encouragement. I remember talking to older men, and these are your stereotypical guys, part of my family, just hardened, working, blue-collar guys. And they were like, oh, don't get married, and oh, it's the last day of your freedom, and blah, blah, all these kind of things. And after a while of being in it, they were like, so how's it going? I was like, man, it feels like one long date. And it just felt great. It felt good, and it was fun. Not easy necessarily, but it was fun. And so they had jokes for me and all that. But I think the first and early years, were really fun.
Yeah.
Not necessarily easy, but fun for sure. And so if you're hearing that from a lot of people, don't let that discourage you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all these, like, you know, how to survive your first year, and I'm like,
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
There will be an element of learning your spouse. You will have to learn them and figure that part again, paying attention to them and seeing how they are and what causes them to be in certain moods and feelings and fears and hopes and all that. But that's part of the work that you put into it and that the Lord works through you guys. So
Yeah.
don't let them scare you.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said the Bible studies don't work out. You have the praying aspect. You guys also fast together, or is it like just praying in that spiritual aspect?
I think we've tried fasting together once or twice, but there's, for some relationships, or if you don't mind me saying, but sometimes there's medical things that may cause you to not be able to fast, and that's our case. And so that kind of takes the fasting element out. And so we haven't been able to fast so much recently together. So the praying is, again, the thing that we've really leaned on, tried to.
Yeah.
Not perfect at it, but yeah.
Did you guys try anything else? I don't know, like recapping, I guess.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my messages and stuff like that. I was like, hey, what were you talking? She'll ask me, what were you talking about today? And I'll get into messages and we'll kind of talk a little bit about, oh, that's really neat. I didn't think about it. It makes me think about this. That could be a series, or that could be a this, or that could be a that. And so we'll kind of recap messages and talk through scripture in that way and just kind of see. And something I love that when you ask is in her work environment, obviously I get the privilege of working around Christians a lot of times. She doesn't have that luxury of working around Christians all the time. And so for her work environment, it's oftentimes like, hey, these people were doing this. What do you think is something I could do? Or I did this.
Yeah.
What do you think they thought about that? Or we're talking about this topic at work. Somebody asked me about this. What are some of the things I could say? Or what do you think if I said this? And so we kind of talk about, I guess that's kind of like a little bit of evangelism there at work. And so we have those conversations that I really enjoy having.
Yeah, and I think it's an ongoing improvement too, because, you know, your spiritual walk never stops growing. And so I feel like your different seasons are going to call for different things, but also you're always striving to do better and do more and improve more. It's not like, okay, we did X, Y, and Z. My relationship with God is, you know, the bucket is full. It's, you know, it's this ongoing thing and kind of what works for us. And not that, you know, a devotional wouldn't work now, it just never has in the past. And we're not opposed to like trying it again. We have good intentions, but, you know, to be honest, the follow through is the most challenging for us when it comes to something like that. Yeah. So, and we talk about getting into growth groups together too, but
Kids are hard.
it's it's taxing, and maybe it's just the season where we're praying and talking, and you know, and next season it's, you know, we can do a devotional and actually do it.
Yeah. Or do the growth group.
Yeah, or a growth group. We watched The Chosen together. I really loved
fun,
that.
yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen
watched it a
that
couple times
series
through.
or not, but watching it with your spouse is different than watching it by yourself, because there's so many things to like talk about. And
Episode 1, first season.
yeah,
still.
like you're both in tears on a couch together, and you know, it just kind of drums up different conversations and prayers and reminiscing and, you know, a lot of other things. So, yeah. But
Anybody in the back?
Anybody else? Before we close, I have one question for both of you.
okay.
You both work outside the home, and you work in a Christian environment. You do not. How much, if any, of the office do you bring home?
I pretty much just what I said. Like she'll ask me what the message is, and that's kind of the extent to which I like to bring home. I feel a very poignant charge to protect her from some of the things that people will bring up or people will talk about and do all this. And so I intentionally will not talk about certain things or people or circumstances that come up because I want to protect her from that. Because in this line of work, sometimes people forget that, like, man, this is my job here part of the week, and it's my place of worship, and those lines can get very blurred at times. And I don't want those lines, I don't want her to have to fight through those lines like I've had to fight through those lines. And so I feel a very poignant charge to protect her from that.
I have the luxury of, once I leave the building at my work, I don't have to bring anything home, which is great. I'm not the owner, I'm not the CEO, so at 6 o'clock when I check out, so does everything else work related. I never bring home work, ever. And maybe it's the type of work I do. It just, I don't have to bring home a laptop and do emails and things like that. I'm with patients, so if there's not a patient in front of me, I'm not working.
And there's been times where, you know, something's happened or something taking place and, like, I'm pissed or whatever it is, and excuse my French. But that's just like, sometimes, like every once in a while, something will take place and be like, I got to tell you about this. I got to get it off my chest.
Right.
And then there
That
is
will
an
come
element, and where I'm still looking to guard around certain things, but there's an element of like, hey, I need you because I think the Lord has positioned you next to me so that I can get through some of this stuff. And as a man, checking myself, knowing when I need to be vulnerable, I think it's a big deal too.
Yeah. And also,
And likewise, she does the same thing too.
yeah, and you know, because I don't work in a Christian environment, there's conversations that do come up, and I'll share those conversations with him and get, you know, just incitement as far as insightful information as like, hey, what would you say, or what scripture can I look at, and things like that, just to kind of go back to my coworkers and talk a little bit further. So, but yeah, our work does not come home, and we try not to make it come home.
All right.
Anyone else? Anyone? All right. All right. Well, man, that was good.
All right.
I don't
Good.
know about anybody else, but I got 3 or 4 nuggets to post and a couple of nuggets to go home and talk to Jill.
Oh gosh.
I want a bike.
With a cup of coffee in hand.
No, it was really good. Man, I'm so glad you guys came. And
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys,
Thank you guys,
for allowing us to
everybody.
talk.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So now we'll move into the last portion, and this is where hopefully everyone was thinking of something, because even if you're not dating or you're dating, or like some of you guys are newlyweds or been married, you can always grab nuggets of truth for today and tomorrow. And so I was glad you guys did talk about, you know, the dating process also, which I think we will have you guys come back, because I happen to know their testimony, and it's really cool. It really is. So we may have to have y'all come back and do that. But what I want us to do right now, take about 5 or 10 minutes, grab hold of something that they've said that you're like, man, I can take that, and either I'm gonna file that away because I'm not married, or if I'm dating, married, go ahead and write it down, not write it down, but put it in your phone and say, this is what it is, and this is how I'm gonna apply it, okay? Because if you do not deadline it, put it on a calendar, you'll never walk it out. It'll just be a great time, and you'll walk away and go, man, those guys have a really awesome marriage, and I wish I had one like theirs. Well, if you apply some of the things that they've shared, you could be on your way to that type of relationship. So take that time, write something down, put it down, or either just hum to yourself for the next 10 minutes. All right.